Hello everyone, we've got another game between AlphaZero against Stockfish, played in 2018, and I asked you the question, is this the best Evans Gambit you've ever seen? In this game AlphaZero was playing white, Stockfish is playing black, and after e4, e5, knight to f3, knight c6, bishop c4 and bishop c5, the book move played is b4, and after bishop takes b4, there's c3 and bishop a5, d4. And the book continues with d6 from black, queen to b3, queen to d7 and knight bd2, followed by bishop b6 by Stockfish. And this is the end of the book move, and we're into an Evans Gambit, where white has sacrificed the pawn on b4 to gain some immense play against black's position. Now I feel like this game is quite different to your typical Evans Gambit, because usually white is quite aggressive, plays a few sacrifices, has a nice game. Kasparov played against Anand a few times, and it's just a great opening for attacking potential. But here you'll notice that AlphaZero plays it quite differently. So for the first move, AlphaZero castles kingside, a very logical move. And here black has an option to make. The two candidate moves here are maybe knight to a5 or e takes d4. If e takes d4 from black, white may continue c takes d4, and after knight takes d4, knight takes d4, bishop takes d4. It looks as though black is a few pawns up already, and is nicely attacking this rook on a1 with the bishop. So white's logical move is to play rook to b1. Black might continue knight to f6, simple logical move, and white will play knight to f3, hitting the bishop, and once the bishop drops back to b6, black should be fine, right? Well, actually here in this position white can play e5, attacking the knight on f6 and hitting his pawn on d6. I don't think black wants to take this pawn, because if takes, then there's moves like bishop to a3 stopping black from castling kingside, and white should gain a really nice attack here with, say, rook f d1 next move, or maybe even rook to e1 hitting this pawn on e5. So after e5 black is forced to move the knight. So let's say knight g4. Well, now white can play h3, hitting the knight again. And here black has two moves. One of them is knight takes f2, and the rook will recapture, followed by the bishop recapturing and the king, and black can now safely castle, but at the expense of giving up two pieces for the rook, which is not ideal. And after a move like bishop b2 here for white, I think white's definitely in the driving seat, and has these two bishops just raking down the board, hitting the black position. So after h3, knight takes e5 is the other candidate move, but now white just opens up the position with takes, d takes and rook d1 hitting the queen, and bishop d4 is the only way to block it. And here white should play bishop to a3 and stop black castling. And now black is in a very tricky position, because it's very hard to see what they can do to progress. White's attacking this b7 pawn twice and also attacking this f7 pawn twice. In fact, Stockfish 10 actually says that after f6, white can even afford to play rook takes d4 in this position. That's because if queen takes d4, there comes bishop to f7 check, king d8 and then rook to d1, with a very nice game for white. So even as early on as castles for white here, black has to be extremely careful, because there's a lot of potential for white to gain an attack against black. This is the power of the Evans Gambit opening. In the game, knight to a5 was played by Stockfish, so hitting this bishop on c4, hitting the queen at the same time, and AlphaZero treats the queen back to c2. Black now takes on d4, the pawn recaptures, and again Stockfish has a decision to make. In the game they played knight to e7, but knight takes c4 may have been an option given what happened in the game, where the knight gets stuck on a5 all game. So knight takes c4, knight takes c4. Play will probably continue with knight to e7, and white could actually play a4 here, preparing the move a5. So maybe this is why black didn't take the bishop, because this forces black to play a move like a6, giving the bishop space to move, and then white can just simply play knight takes b6, and after c takes b6, play d5, and black now has these two double pawns, and will exert some pressure on this open c-file. And again, even though black's a pawn up, I feel like white will win that pawn back very quickly, with moves like bishop to e3 coming very quick, and attacking this b6 pawn. So that's why maybe black didn't take the bishop. Instead they played knight to e7 developing, and AlphaZero continued their development with rook to e1 getting behind this e pawn. Stockfish castled, and white retreated their bishop back to f1, and I've just highlighted this knight on a5 because it leaves this knight rather stranded now. So maybe black should actually play knight to c6 in this position, because even after d5, black's got a decent game after knight to d4, takes, and bishop b2, where black can recapture. So black still is a pawn up in this position, so they're doing quite well. So I definitely think knight c6 was an option for black. Queen c6 may have also been an option. After queen b1, white does threaten bishop b5, and maybe black is forced to maybe move like queen e8 and bishop b2. Again, still a solid game for black and white, to be fair. But after bishop to f1, in the game Stockfish now played queen to d8. And I'll be totally honest, I'm not exactly sure what the thought process behind that move was. Maybe it's just to develop the bishop on c8. AlphaZero played bishop to a3. Stockfish played knight to g6. And here AlphaZero played a very long-term positional move. They played the move d5. So what does d5 do? Well, it opens up this bishop for black. It gives black a nice space on e5. But it also limits the c6 square, and this is key because it now limits this knight on a5. This knight is absolutely stranded. It's a passenger in this game. It can't move to c4, b3 or c6 anymore, and as you'll see, it just seems to sit there all game. Stockfish played rook to e8, bishop b4 now from white, and now rook to b8 was played by black. So it looks like black might be preparing the move c6 at some point and try and unleash this rook on the open b file. White plays rook a d1, preparing to meet c6 with possible d takes c6, and this will open up the d file for the rook. So after c6 is played, AlphaZero now played the move queen to b2. AlphaZero is just saying to black, you decide what to do with this c pawn, because I'm not going to take it. For instance, if now black takes this pawn, I feel like this is very good for white, because after takes, there comes a recapture on e1. Black can play bishop g4, and play will just continue with, let's say, h3. And this knight on a5 is still stranded, and actually white may be able to play queen c3 at some point and try and win this knight. So after queen to b2, black didn't take on d5, instead they played the move c5, hitting the bishop on b4, and of course the only square for the bishop is c3. Bishop takes e5 will probably not be very good, it just helps black. So basically you've just got rid of black's worst piece, because then black can just play bishop takes a5 and has a great dark square bishop now. After rook to e3, black can play bishop takes d2, rook takes d2 and just play b5 and start launching these pawns down the board. Black's got an excellent game. So after c5, bishop c3 is the only logical move, and to be fair, white now does hit the g7 pawn. So black is forced actually to play f6 in this position, which is what Stockfish plays, and white plays a4, tying down this other side of the board. It just limits black's play. In actual fact, black's got a cluster of pieces here, all not doing very much, and it just seems to be under control of these two pawns and this bishop. It seems to do a lot of work just limiting black's piece play here. Black played bishop c7 then, trying to unwind this position. Queen to a2 from AlphaZero, getting behind this a pawn, maybe preparing rook to b1, but again it's all about control. Rook to e7 was played by Stockfish, and there's not really much black can do, just sit and move pieces around. h3 is played by AlphaZero, stopping black playing bishop g4. So black's forced to play bishop to d7. Rook a1 is played to get behind this a4 pawn and protect it. Stockfish played king h8. AlphaZero plays knight h2. So there's a bit of shuffling going on here. Bishop b6 is played. Rook a b1. King g8. Knight goes back to f3. Bishop e8 from black. King h2 from AlphaZero. Bishop c7. Rook b2. Stockfish plays rook a8. White plays rook to a1. Bishop d7. Queen b1. So these are a very weird series of moves. It seems like both sides are just manoeuvring ever so slightly, trying to get the optimal position. This is what computers tend to do. And at this very moment, maybe white's hitting this b7 pawn. I'm not sure it's if white can actually take it, because this will involve giving the knight on a5 for the bishop up. So Stockfish defends it anyway with bishop to c8. White plays knight to g1, just rerouting the knight. Queen to f8 from Stockfish, and now knight to e2. And finally Stockfish lunges with the move f5, so finally we have a break in the position. And this gives AlphaZero a decision to make. If they take the pawn with e takes f5, I feel like this is very good for black. Black can take with the bishop, and now suddenly black's position just comes to life. The queen's attacked, it's got to move to a2. And amazingly, black's got a great move here, a great sacrifice. They can play bishop takes h3. And now black's suddenly got an amazing attack. For instance, if g takes h3, there comes queen takes f2, and suddenly black's infiltrating white's position. If king h1, black can play rook takes e2. After bishop takes, queen takes. What is white to do in this position? Black is the exchange down, but the king is wide open to an attack. The best move given is rook f1, but even after this, knight h4 can come, threatening mate. Rook g1 to defend, and black calmly plays g6 in this position. And the best move given is bishop takes a5. And after black recaptures, queen c4, black can play queen to e5, hitting the rook. If rook c2, black takes the knight, the queen recaptures the knight on h4, queen takes d5, rook g2 and bishop to e3. And after the smoke's cleared, black's got a very nice game. So black is actually 4 pawns up, is the exchange down but 4 pawns up in an absolutely one endgame. So this would have been incredibly nice. I should just say that after this bishop takes h3 move, the king can take this bishop, but again black can play rook takes e2. After bishop takes e2, queen takes f2. The bishop's attacked on e2, and also moves like knight to f4 are coming in straight away. So black is definitely better in this position. So we'll come back to f5 for black. So white doesn't really want to take this pawn off. And in the game AlphaZero didn't take the pawn. Instead they played the move knight to g3. Stockfish continued with the move f4, attacking this knight. And AlphaZero plays knight to f5. And this is actually given as a dead equal position at this very moment. Stockfish takes this knight off, the pawn recaptures, black plays knight to e5, and white plays knight to f3, with a dead equal game at this very moment. If black decides to take this knight off, white would respond with g takes f3, and after rook to f7, I feel like white gets an advantage with f6, and this pawn becomes very powerful. If black ignores this and plays g6, then white can play bishop to d3, and actually maybe has a sacrifice on g6, so black has to be very careful. So this is the reason why black didn't take on f3 and double white's pawns. It's because it just opens lines up for white's bishops. In the game, queen f6 from Stockfish was played, queen c2. And the point is now that this queen protects this bishop on c3 and stops this knight on e5 from moving. Of course, again, knight takes f3 can be played, but again, this opens up this bishop. And after g takes f3, black is suddenly looking very short of moves, and again this knight on a5 is still trapped on this awful square. So b6 is now played by Stockfish, maybe giving the knight on a5 finally a square on b7. Rook e1 is played by AlphaZero, and what this does is again exerts more pressure on this e5 knight. Stockfish played rook f8, and queen d1 is played by white. Again, knight takes f3, the queen now can recapture, and suddenly this bishop on c3 is attacking this queen. Stockfish continued with rook to d7. AlphaZero plays bishop to b5, hitting the rook, and the rook retreats back to the d8 square. AlphaZero protects their bishop on c3 with the rook on c2. And Stockfish now captures this pawn on f5 because it's on pre. Queen takes f5. And it feels like white has been waiting for that move to be played, because suddenly AlphaZero springs into life with the move rook c to e2. And suddenly you've got 4 pieces attacking this e5 knight. So it looks like black has to move this knight. Surely knight takes f3 is the best move. Well, actually this just loses for black. Again, g takes f3. And what does black play in this position? Because this e-file is totally dominated by these 2 rooks and this bishop. And the next move is coming, just rook to e7, hitting this bishop and this pawn on g7. And there's literally no way to defend this. g6 may be the only move. And again, white can just play rook to e7 and attack this bishop on c7 and play rook to g7. If rook to f7, white can play queen to e2. And if rook f8, there's an amazing move bishop to e8 for white. And black's forced to take the rook. And after queen takes, white's threatening mates on g7. So after rook f7 is the only move. Bishop takes f7 we played, queen takes, queen e8, captures, captures, king f7 and then rook c8. And it's game over, good night for black because they just lost another piece. So the tactics are definitely there. So that's all occurred after knight takes f3. But finally Stockfish moves their other knight. They play knight to b7, finally moving this knight off his terrible a5 square. At least for the time being anyway. White has the option to take on e5 now, so if knight takes e5, black can recapture. And I thought white may gain an advantage with bishop takes e5, but actually black can play the move maybe knight to d6, and we have to ask the question, does white really want black to get this knight back into this game? Possibly not. So after knight b7, AlphaZero played a better move, I think. They played the move bishop to a6, hitting this knight on b7, and you've guessed it, there's no square for this knight. And sadly it's forced to retreat back to this horrible a5 square. But black now is able to play knight to c4 because they've got two knights converging on this square. But AlphaZero shuts this down straight away with the move rook to e4. It's quite humorous really. Slowly white's just clamping down on black's position. Stockfish continued with queen to f6. And again AlphaZero just controls more squares. Back to bishop b5. The knight jumps back to b7 once again, a bit of a troll move, and AlphaZero plays bishop to c4. And after bishop c4, again, if black decides to take the knight on f3, this queen takes f3 once again, and after queen g6, rook to e7, black is just lost. So after bishop c4, a troll move is played once again, knight to a5, hitting this bishop on c4. Finally though, it seems that AlphaZero has had enough, just drops the bishop back to a2 and keeps all the white squares under control. Stockfish played king to h8 and bishop b1 is now played by AlphaZero. That's an interesting move. So the point is though that after knight to c4, you think black may be getting their knight back into the game. Actually white can just respond with rook takes c4 because this knight is still pinned against this queen. So, in this position Stockfish played the move rook d to e8, and amazingly actually Stockfish 10 still gives both sides as dead equal, even though I feel like white is gaining absolute control over black's position. White played the move king to g1, and what happens here if black continues with the trolling? Let's say knight to b7, rerouting the knight back. Well I feel like white's best move here is knight takes e5, and after d takes e5, white will play queen to d3 and eye up this h7 pawn. Queen h6 holds on to this pawn, and maybe white can play bishop takes e5. But after rook takes, bishop takes, rook takes, black can play f3 to finish off this manoeuvre. However here, white can play queen takes f3 and has back rank mate ideas. So after king g8, bishop to f5, preparing the move bishop to e6. There's queen f6 and queen e2. So I've given the note white is slightly better here, but black is still very much in the game. But after king g1, Stockfish just simply plays king to g8, another manoeuvring move. But actually here it feels like AlphaZero is now ready to pounce. They play h4, maybe playing knight g5 and knight to e6. Amazingly, in this position, Stockfish 10 actually wants to play knight takes f3, and after queen takes f3, they want to play the move rook to e5, possibly giving up an exchange. Maybe it realises finally that actually AlphaZero's plan is really devastating. So after h4, black played c4. Remember, this is Stockfish 8. So AlphaZero plays knight to g5. Simple plan of playing rook takes e5, followed maybe by knight takes h7 or bishop takes h7. So black plays g6 to blunt this bishop. However, this allows AlphaZero now to jump in with knight to e6, hitting the rook and the bishop at the same time. If rook to f7, white can play rook takes f4 because the knight on e6 is defending it. After queen to e7, white should play rook takes f7. After the queen takes on f7, white can continue their attack with h5. And just look at black's pieces. This knight on a5 is terrible, this bishop on c7 is terrible. It's really going to be hard to defend black's position. If black plays, let's say, bishop to d8 to get the bishop in the game, white will take the knight. After recaptures, take on g6, and just take on e5. And this knight on e6 is just dominating black's position. And let's say bishop to f6 for black. Maybe white can play rook to e3 and just reroute this rook to a different square. Maybe rook to g3 and hit this weak g6 pawn. Probably black's final defender. And this position is actually given plus 12 by Stockfish 10. That's how good white's position is. So after knight to e6, Stockfish 8 takes the knight with the rook, so it gives up the exchange. After d takes, there's queen takes. So if we just evaluate this position for a split second, black's just given up the exchange, but they do have 3 pawns. So to the human eye, this looks like a really nice equal position for both sides. There's still a lot of chances actually. But then you realise AlphaZero is playing white and this machine is just too accurate. Next, they infiltrate the weak white squares. AlphaZero played bishop to a2. Stockfish played king to g7, getting off this diagonal. But now queen to e2, and then again there's 4 pieces hitting this knight on e5, and the knight is now pinned against this king. Stockfish played rook to f6, and now the tactics work in white's favour. Bishop takes c4. The point is, after knight takes c4, AlphaZero now recaptures with the queen. And if knight takes the queen, obviously white will take on e6 with an easy endgame. So Stockfish takes the queen back with the queen. Rook takes c4 is played, knight takes c4, and AlphaZero plays a cheeky move, rook to e7, check. And black can't block this because the rook is pinned, so king to f8 is played, and now white just plays bishop to f6, and the bishop on c7 is attacked. Bishop d8 is pretty much the only move, and plays now rook to e4, hitting the knight and hitting the bishop, so black's probably going to have to swap off. If d5 here, white can actually play rook takes c4, and after d takes c4, take the bishop, and the bishop should be just in time to stop this c3 pawn. So if c3 is bishop g5, c2, bishop takes f4, and white is just in time. In the game though, Stockfish now played knight to d2, attacking the rook. Rook takes f4 though from AlphaZero, and after bishop takes f6, rook takes f6, king e7. White plays rook to f4, knight to b3 from black. And now this seems like a clean-up operation for white. They play king f1, knight c5, and h5. So black doesn't really want to take that pawn because white will just play rook to h4 and sweep up another pawn. Black played a5. AlphaZero just strengthens their king position, king e2. Black played knight to e6 to attack the rook. Rook c4 and now knight c5 again. But again, white strengthens their king. King e6, rook g4, king f7, rook to d4 to hit the pawn, king e6. Interestingly now white played h6, so that's a very interesting move. In fact, that's a good note to take, that white's going to try and win the endgame by capturing this h7 pawn. I think for human players this position for white will be very tricky to win, so it's very good to see what type of moves white plays. King e7 is played by black, f4 now, knight to e6, AlphaZero plays rook to d2, maybe preparing moves like rook to b2, and it's going to be very tricky to defend these pawns. Knight c5, white defends the pawn on a4, knight d7, rook to b2, so attacking this pawn on b6 and stopping black from moving that knight at the moment. King f6 and rook b5 from AlphaZero. And here it seems that actually black resigned the game. So why did they resign? Well, okay, let's see. If king to e7, I'm guessing white will play g4. If king f6, g5, king f7. And just now, I think white just slowly marches their king up. Let's say king d4, if king e6, king c4, and it looks as though black's going to start losing material. So black can't move this king away because then white will infiltrate on d5, and they can't move the knight because then the rook will capture on b6. So let's say knight c5, rook takes b6, king f5, rook takes d6, knight takes a4, and white's got this nice cheeky rook f6. After king g4, you can play rook to f7, and this looks like game over for black. So it seems as though Stockfish may have resigned prematurely. Obviously AlphaZero was just going to win that endgame. It's inevitable really. But the reason I've called this potentially the best Evans Gambit ever is because in the whole game, after this c5 moving bishop to c3, throughout this whole game that knight on a5 has just been absolutely stranded on that square. And it's an amazing demonstration of control from white and AlphaZero. I just want to say, and this is high level chess, this is like beyond super grandmaster chess. Even analysing with an engine, I don't understand some of AlphaZero's moves because they're just so light years ahead of like what we should be thinking about. So what should black done differently? I think maybe after queen c2 in this position, maybe black should just take on c4, take this bishop off, and not leave this knight stranded on a5 the whole game. After knight takes c4, again black's position doesn't look too bad. Black should just maybe play queen c6, hit the knight, and after knight takes b6, a takes b6. I feel like black's got a decent game. Maybe white will continue takes, and queen a4. But again, material is even, and actually white's got a lot of pawn islands here for black to infiltrate. So maybe black should have gone down this route. But anyway, what did you think of this game? Was this the best Evans Gambit ever? Please drop a comment and let me know. But I hope you enjoyed my analysis. Please drop me a like, comment or subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. And I'll see you in the next video. Please also comment if you want me to go over any games or one of your own games. And I'll see you next time. Cheers guys.